I'm going to do the right thing, Lasara. Veer began, his voice melding into a strange cross between the ship's synthetic voice and his own. Chills ran down my spine as I quickly stood up from my seat, ready to leap into the docking bay where I'd seen a few shuttles stowed. Yet I wasn't doing this because I was fearful of the AI. I knew he understood what the right thing was in this situation. I've made so many mistakes in the past, many of them stemming from a lack of trust and faith in my crew, or an overconfidence in my own decision-making heuristics. I know this is logically, statistically the wrong decision. I know this is a major risk, but I am willing to take this leap of faith. As you had done when you entrusted the ship to me. The doors to the bridge quickly opened up, revealing what was effectively a highlighted path that popped into the HUD I didn't even realize existed on my goggles. Follow the path. There's a shuttle warming up and readying for your arrival. In it, you'll find an EVA suit. It's made for a human, so your head frills and limbs might find it a bit of a tight squeeze. It was with those faded words that I immediately leaped for the hallways, sprinting, ducking, and weaving through a few corridors that had been damaged in the fight, before finally reaching the shuttle bay as I leaped towards what seemed to be a craft the size of a small two-story home. It was shaped almost like a traditional aircraft hull, complete with winglets that seemed to be able to stretch out, as if hinting that this thing had space-to-air capabilities, perhaps useful if we ever needed to land on a planet. The rear of the craft quickly opened, revealing a spacious cargo bay, and within it, a room made specifically for EVA prep work. I sprinted past all of that, opening a hatch which gave way to a single hallway with rooms flanking either side. A stairwell in the middle of the hallway that led to the small cockpit on the second deck, encased in what seemed to be a series of diamond-shaped windows that formed a bubble, which allowed for near 360 degrees of unimpeded vision. The chair, console, and interfaces seemed to be reminiscent of the one on the bridge, as the ship ran whatever diagnostics it needed, and a familiar voice began echoing throughout the room. I've uploaded a virtual machine capable of live uplinking with the shuttle. This should give me limited control and full awareness of this vehicle, but since I can't multitask two vehicles at once, it should be reserved for situations that call for it. It'll be up to you to perform most of the piloting and rescuing. There's a med bay in the main hallway to the right, and auto-aid facilities that are more or less completely autonomous. With that said, I need you to untether immediately. The interloper ship is beginning to make moves on the satellite. With a firm nod and a swipe of the control surfaces, the shuttle careened to life as it left the shuttle bay, just grazing the top of the roof, sending sparks flying and small pieces of debris into the void. I'm going to take that as a breaking in the ship maneuver, Lasara. Veer spoke sardonically, with a dry chuckle. This is where we temporarily split up. Good luck. And when I do dispatch at the freighter, I'll rendezvous with you ASAP. Good luck, Space Cowboy. I peered behind me, only to see the massive kilometer-long vessel accelerate to near-luminal speeds, fading away in what felt like a fraction of a second. With the reality of the situation dawning on me, I pushed the shuttle forward, closing the distance toward the wreck and the exposed corridor leading to that lone life signature. I didn't want to do that. I knew this was the wrong call, but it felt right, and so I went with my gut. Perhaps it was the wrong thing to do, but I didn't know what was what anymore. The freighter was now well within firing range, but it wasn't making any moves on the satellite. It was with this that I took the time to scan it thoroughly, unconvinced that it was well and truly unarmed and defenseless. There was something off about the whole affair, something that didn't sit quite right with me. But as the scans finally revealed the contents of the ship, there was an unmistakable air of dread more confusing than the scans of the heavy cruiser prior. Inside was indeed two interloper bioforms, alive and active. But beside that, an additional 200 life forms were detected, 50 of which did not match any on the ship's registry, but 150 of which were unmistakably Veneran in biological makeup. I had a choice, an uncomfortable one that I would have to answer for with Lasara. But it was yet another choice I knew was right. With a single shot from the laser focusing array, I blew out their engines, and cut off any chance they had of escape. I wouldn't destroy them just yet. I needed time to unpack what was going on, and a ship dead in the water was good enough for me, as I began a more detailed sensor sweep of its interiors. The EVA suit was just as tight and uncomfortable as Veer had warned. The Veneran form was similar enough, yet intrinsically different from a human's, that it was truly testing the limits of this suit. Yet it managed to do regardless. My digitigrade legs went in first, stretching, almost tearing the leggings, only for it to somehow remorph and contort around it. My torso, which was broader than an average human's, likewise fit as the fabric seemed to reshape itself and stuck to me like a second skin. It seemed as if the material was flexible, capable of molding and contorting to one's body. To what limits, I did not know, but I was glad it was the case regardless. The helmet, however, was the main issue. It clearly wasn't made to be as flexible or as dynamic as the skin suit I now wore. I had to squish in my ear frills uncomfortably close to my scalp for it to fit. And even then there was this constant, uncomfortable pain as it forced that sensitive cartilage down in a way that it was never meant to be bent. But it didn't matter. The pain was only temporary. The mission had to press onward. I kept the back portion of the shuttle open as I leaped from it, using the suit's thrusters to ease me forward into the gaping hole in the cruiser. Activating the magnetic boots, I sprinted my way towards that faint life signature, eventually coming face to face with the sarcophagus that held my fellow Veneran. I could see her face, strangely contorted and frozen in pain. Panic welled within me as I attempted to push aside my worries. It was just the side effects of artificial hibernation, I thought to myself. The plasma cutter that came with the suit made short work of the sarcophagus supports, as it floated listlessly until I pushed it out of the room and into the disheveled hallways. The blown-out corridors of the cruiser weren't an obstacle for me. They were almost an afterthought as I careened down them with the sarcophagus in tow. But something about them felt off. There were design elements so esoterically at home in Veneran ships and stations that it just didn't make sense here. Those thoughts quickly left my mind, however, as I bridged the gap back towards the shuttle and rushed the sarcophagus into the medbay. I promptly took my irritating helmet off, tossing it aside, as I ran those tentative scans on the only other survivor of my kind. A quick scan from the medbay's computers, however, prompted more questions than answers. The Veneran was stuck in what seemed to be a hibernative's trance. But that didn't make sense. I'd woken up naturally. That meant every other Veneran should as well. There was no recorded instance of a Veneran being unable to wake up from a typical hibernation cycle. And even if they were cryogenically frozen, the reading should not have resembled that of a traditional hibernative trance. All the signs pointed to this being natural, which it wasn't. I racked my mind over this for the longest while, my eyes going back and forth across the monitor as I heard a sudden hiss from the sarcophagus. Further scans on the freighter have led to increasingly anomalous readings. There was a latent energy signature that I could not pin down. It wasn't a standard radio signature, nor was it something traditionally sent through subspace. It was something so completely anomalous to my scanners that sometimes induced in me this uncomfortable sense of what most organics might call nausea. I could determine certain specifics, though. The signal rippled from the ship, its epicenter, all throughout the system in a series of sporadic and weak transmissions. Yet nothing pinged it back. It couldn't be a distress signal, however, because it was localized to this system, and this system alone. Furthermore, it didn't go through subspace, so it was trapped by the limits of relativistic speeds. I continued focusing, hyperfixating on the strange anomaly, as the signal kept pulsing over and over again. I turned around, hoping to see an alive and well Veneran recovering from hibernation, but was met with something far stranger. Instead of the ills immediately encountered post-awakening, the person was standing at full height, arms neatly tucked to their sides and legs planted firmly on the ground. No wobbling, no signs of disorientation. Nothing. But what was most disconcerting were those eyes. Instead of the weary, perhaps worn, confused, and sleep-addled eyes of the recently awoken, I was met with a soulless and untempered intensity. She did not blink. There was not so much as a single hint of any emotion other than this raw and bridled severity. An expressionless frown didn't make things easier as well, as the Veneran stepped forward, even more mechanically than Veer's movements, and spoke in clear, crisp intonations. "I am unwell. You must take me to your mothership. The facilities here will not be able to sustain my health for much longer." I could only blink awkwardly at that, my heart skipping a beat as a feeling of dread gripped me. Why don't we start with your name? Maybe a scan? How are you feeling? We don't even know what's wrong with you. Let's take this one step at a time, okay? I'm Lassar Ta'el Parfundinier of the Janari clan. What is your name? It was subtle, but the other Veneran seemed to slowly warm up after that greeting. Hints at emotion had begun to seep through the strained intonation of her speech, as if she was relearning the basics of the sing-song-like tonality of Veneran speech the more I spoke. I do not remember. It must be something to do with my illness. I am feeling incredibly unwell. I am not myself right now. There has to be better treatment facilities than the one here. She looked around, her face contorting, straining as if trying to force out a look of genuine concern and distress, but only managing to pull off a visage that was a cross between a frown and a disturbing half-grin. Her facial muscles practically strained to pull off even the subtlest hints of facial expression, bulging, almost straining against the soft pink of her skin. Everything in my body told me this wasn't right. Nothing about this conversation made sense. If anything, this just felt like some disgusting facsimile of a Veneran. One that didn't blink until recently. One that didn't so much as pay the typical Veneran social cues any mind. Listen, I'd feel more comfortable if you just took a simple scan right here, right now. If there's something wrong, I'm certain we can pick something up, I managed out. The other Veneran, however, simply took one look at the scanner, at the human symbol emblazoned atop of it, and frowned. She frowned a deep, almost impossibly menacing frown that still bore little resemblance to genuine emotion. She turned to face me with this frown, with this cheek-to-cheek dimple that was seemingly isolated on the bottom of her face, leaving the top half of her face confusingly neutral in its countenance. I took a simple step back, trying to keep my distance now as the other Veneran maintained their position, cocking their heads slightly. I do not feel comfortable on an alien ship. Please, Lasara, take me to the mothership. Your real mothership. She continued to insist. Her voice was becoming increasingly normalized with each passing word, something which disturbingly contrasted with her radically disjointed expressions. I couldn't keep doing this, not when I felt in my gut that something was seriously wrong here. So I inched for the door, taking slow, imperceptible steps back. I insist. I need to get something from the bridge too. The other Veneran finally stepped forward. A loud clang shattered the silence as she accidentally knocked down a collection of medical equipment sitting precariously off the edge of the examination bench. This caused my frills to immediately spring up and for my instincts to kick in. Without warning, I leaped for the door, my hand placed firmly on its unlocking mechanism, before suddenly I was pulled back. I felt my windpipe close shut as I looked up to see the female Veneran locking my neck in her elbow. You will take me to the mothership, Lasara. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Everything I used is in the description below. If there's a story you'd like to hear narrated, let me know and I'll reach out to the author and see if we can make that happen. Thanks again. It's a scary world out there, but remember to be brave and look up, to seek the stars.